Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO. Joining me in studio right now, candidate for Texas 19. The runoff going on right now. First day of early voting was yesterday. Today is day number 2. Glen Robertson in studio with me. For the, I guess, the official final day of Mayor Glen Robertson.
Hey, I'll serve until about 5:15 today. At 5 o'clock, I'll open the meeting. We'll canvass the vote. Then we'll swear in the new elected council members and the new mayor, and it's going to be bittersweet. I've had a great 4 years. I've loved this job, but it's time to move on.
Well, and you're hoping to move on to Congress?
Yes, sir.
And let's talk about some of the big issues out there, and let's start off with something that sort of blew up, I guess, over the weekend, and this is Social Security.
Yes.
And this is something that I think last time you were on the show, you said this is one of the points where you disagree with your opponent, Mr. Arrington. There was a mailer that went out, and it says that there's nothing courageous. And so the full flyer says, Washington insider Jody Arrington says it takes courage to cut your Social Security. There's nothing courageous about stealing from seniors.
Correct.
And you're referencing, I think, a KCBD debate.
Actually,
that, right?
Two debates back-to-back where my opponent stated that we needed to elect people that had the courage to look at means testing and raising the age for eligibility. He wouldn't get specific at what time and what age. He's came back now and changed his story a little bit and said, well, I'd never do it to anybody that's currently in the Social Security program. But means testing I have a lot of problems with, because that means if you've worked hard your whole life, if you've been responsible, if you've saved for your retirement and you've lived within your means, now under means testing, that's government code for we're going to take money away from you in Social Security, money you've paid in, and we're going to transfer that over to people that haven't been as responsible, that haven't worked as hard. It sounds like Bernie Sanders to me, and I just don't know that's a good policy. We can fix Social Security. We can fix Medicare. And it really only takes two things. The solution's simple. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy, but it is simple. Number one is you get Congress's hand out of the cookie jar. They've got to quit taking money out of that Social Security fund. But number two, we've got to put American citizens back to work. The problem with Social Security today is not the system. It's the fact that we've got a welfare state where we don't have people working and contributing to it. We've got to change those policies and put our citizens back to work.
I went back and I watched footage from the chamber debate that was on KCBD. In that debate, he did say, Arrington did say that for those who were of retirement age or in retirement right now, that they weren't going to, that nothing would be changed, and that those approaching or near retirement, nothing would be changed. Is that, for you, is that not good enough, or is that not specific enough? At what point? I'm in my 30s. Right. So should things change for me?
No, they shouldn't, and it's not good enough for me. Because I think it's just as bad to go after you with means testing as it is somebody that's my age, 57. I don't think it really matters your age. Now, these plans to raise the eligibility and to means test, and the means testing is what I take great exception to. I don't care if you're 25 years old or if you're 55 or if you're 65. The fact that we're going to penalize the people that are taking care of business, that are being responsible, or being self-reliant, or planning for their future, and we're going to take money away from them that they've put into Social Security either in the past or in the future, and we're going to transfer that wealth to less responsible individuals. I take great exception with that. So, it's one of those defining issues between my opponent and me. I do not believe we need the means test. I also believe we don't need to raise the age for eligibility. I think we need to get Congress out of the cookie jar, and we need to put American citizens back to work. And if we do that, Social Security and Medicare will remain solvent.
So if Congress ever does anything, and it's one of these issues, and I think you would agree that Social Security overall, bringing this up before Congress, it is, some have called it the third rail.
Yes.
That it's one of those deals where you're just not going to, you may not see it happen unless there is a true emergency,
right?
Underway, and that the American people are freaked out about. Under no circumstance would you vote to raise the retirement age?
You know, the only circumstance that I'd look at that is if we raise the retirement age for people entering the job market today. If you've been in the job market for 5 years or 10 years or 30 or 40 years, you went into that job market with an agreement from the federal government that we're going to forcefully take money out of your check. You have no choice. We're going to take that money out of your check, and not only that, we're going to make your employer match it. To change the rules in the middle of the game is what's wrong with our government. I think there's other ways to solve the problems in Social Security rather than penalizing the people that have paid their hard-earned money into it without their own consent.
Visiting with Mayor Glen Robertson, candidate for Texas 19. We'll take our first break of this half hour. When we come back, we have many other issues to get into. If you have a question for Mayor Robertson, call in 770-5790. Toll free 1-800-687-0790. Day 2 of early voting today. We'll be right back. All right, back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO. Glen Robertson in studio, discussing his campaign for District 19, and we were just talking about Social Security. We'll get to your phone calls as well. Be patient with us as we try to get to as many as possible, but we also have some other questions that we want to get to as well. One of those is the VA, and this is another point that I know you've said you and your opponent disagree on. Talk to us a little bit about if you're elected, what you would like to see done with the VA.
Well, first we've got to restore funding to the entire military. We've slashed our funding at a time that China and Russia are building their militaries at a rate of about 30 and 33% respectively. We no longer have the respect or the fear of foreign countries that do have evil intent. As we've slashed the military budget, we've slashed the VA. And the problem is we've slashed it on the boots on the ground at the VA clinics and the VA hospitals, and yet we still had the myriad of bureaucracy, level after level of layers of bureaucracy, of people that have no idea the unique treatment that our veterans need. There's over 40,000 veterans that live in this district. And, my opponent wants to talk about more telemedicine, more privatization of the VA system, which would throw these veterans into Obamacare, which has proven to be an absolute catastrophe. We owe these veterans a debt of gratitude, and we have to figure out a way to rebuild these veterans' hospitals, to make sure that they're getting integrated health care from doctors that are used to treating the unique problems that our veterans have.
Should veterans get, and this has been an idea that I think has been proposed before by some Republicans, and it is a card that some veterans would get, and maybe this leads down to privatization, I'm not sure, but they get a card, and they can go to any hospital, any doctor they want. They don't have to go to the VA. What do you think about that idea?
The Disabled Veterans Association is completely against that, and they've laid out a lot of reasons why, and a lot of it is that the unique illnesses and the unique problems that we have with our veterans. You go back to World War II and Korea, and people, our men and women, might serve 1 or 2 tours. We've got people today, young men and women, that are serving 5, 6, 7, 8 tours, and it's a combination of those tours that are creating the PTSD issues. If you send a veteran that's got some pulmonary issues to a regular doctor that doesn't treat veterans, and doesn't understand that perhaps this veteran's been exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam, or perhaps that in the Gulf Wars or in Iraq or Afghanistan he was exposed to airborne elements that we're not used to dealing with. These veterans need that specialized care, and the other problem with it is reimbursements. So now they're going to have this little plastic card, and they're going to go in for treatment, and the doctor's going to say, it may take 6 months to a year for us to get reimbursement. So you have to pay out of pocket. We have a lot of veterans that cannot afford that. So I think it's failed policy. It sounds good on the surface, but when you drill down deep, I think you find out that we'll hurt our veterans with that program.
Let's go to the phones. I have some questions from listeners out there. And David, you're on with Mayor Glen Robertson, candidate for Congress.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on, Chad, this morning. My question was for Glenn about a comment you made about the KCBD debate. I watched the KCBD debate, paid attention closely as I was trying to decide who to vote for in this election, and I saw the mailer you sent out where you said there's nothing courageous about stealing from seniors, talking about Jody Arrington's plan to cut Social Security. Now, to me, that seems pretty cut and dry that you're saying to me, a voter, that that Jody Arrington wants to cut Social Security for seniors. But in the KCBD debate, he said, and I'm quoting here, in this case regarding Social Security, you need to lock down for those who are in retirement or near retirement our commitment to them in respect to Social Security as it is on the books today. You cite in this mailer the KCBD debate. How do you justify to yourself saying that in a mailer when Jody Arrington said the exact opposite? The problem I'm having here is you've said that so many different times with so many different issues from Texas Tech and the ETF. And
would you let me answer the question, David?
Yes, sir. I'll let you have the floor now.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the question. I don't know if you were at the debate the previous night where his story was different, and where I pointed out that he was talking about means testing and raising the age on Social Security recipients, and he didn't mention any age at all. He changed his story the next night, which seems to be a pattern with Mr. Arrington. Means testing, in my opinion, and I said it a while ago, and I don't know if you were listening in the first segment, but I've addressed this issue. Anybody that is for means testing, I take issue with, because I don't think that we can take money away from people that have been responsible. They've been self-reliant. They have taken care of business and planned for their retirement. And for somebody like my opponent to say that means testing, we need people that will have the courage to do that. And in the first debate, he would not specify the age. Now, he came back later and changed his story. I'm glad he did. I hope he's sincere about what he's saying. But I still take great issue with means testing, and if we do means testing, I still believe and stand by the fact that that's stealing money from people's Social Security.
So, and just to clarify, before we go to the break, because we have one more break that we have to get into, and then we'll get back to calls. Just to clarify, it's the means testing that you have the big problem with.
Yes.
The flyer where you say that, or where the flyer says who's going to steal from seniors, do you believe that those who are senior citizens right now, do you think that he would take their Social Security or their Social Security away from them?
Well, I would hope not, but he's changed his position within a 24-hour period. So I don't really know where Mr. Arrington stands, because on one day he stood on one side of the issue and the next day he changed his position. I hope he means what he said in the last debate. But if we start means testing, and it's a slippery slope, and if you say we're going to start means testing for people under 35 or people under 40, it opens the gate for Congress to continue, because they're unwilling to take the efforts it needs to really solve the insolvency problem of Social Security. You'll see that age continue to increase and increase and increase, and it will end up affecting people that are currently in the Social Security system, and I oppose that completely.
All right, when we come back, we'll get to your calls on the phones, as many as we can, here on the Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. All right, Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO. Follow me on Twitter, Chad Hasty Radio, and we have in studio Mayor Glen Robertson running for Texas 19 runoff. The early voting continues today through the rest of this week, Election Day on the 24th. Let's head to the phones, and Megan, you're on KFYO with Glen Robertson.
Hi, I was wondering what you plan on doing if you win the election, Mayor Robertson. Do you plan on going to D.C. with your whole family? Do you plan on leaving people here? What do you plan on doing?
And I think that's one of the most important questions. And here again, another difference between my opponent and me. I've got a wife and 4 sons and 7 grandchildren in the district and 3 businesses. And I plan on getting a small efficiency as close to Capitol Hill as I can afford, which won't be very close because the rents are extremely high. But being back in the district every month, my opponent has stated that he will move his wife and young family to D.C., and I don't blame him. He's got 3 young kids under 6 years old, and they're going to be busy with activities. But I think where we lose our elected representatives is when they move their families to D.C., and it becomes a burden to travel back home because you've got Little League games, you've got dance recitals. So, you know, my concern with my opponent is if he was to win, would we ever see him in the district again? And we've lived with that in the past. I mean, Randy voted right. Randy had one of the most conservative voting records in Congress. But he got to the point, excuse me, where we wasn't seeing him back in the district. And I think my job, as if elected, is to be back in the district, getting back in front of voters and saying, okay, here's what's coming up. Here's the solutions that are on the table. I need to take direction from the people that elected me. My opponent talks about elected leaders. I don't view Congress as leaders. I view them as public servants, and our job is to serve the public, to answer to the people that elected us, to get back in the district, meet with the growers, meet with the small businesses, meet with the folks that have got issues, and take directions and take orders from the people that hired us for this job.
I think we have about 1 minute left or so. So let me ask you this, and I don't think we're going to have time for another question on the phone, so I apologize to the listeners out there. Your opponent has taken a swipe at you over the Omni Building and Citizens Tower.
Yes.
You voted against Citizens Tower.
Three times.
Right. I think you did vote for the company that was going to come in and do some bidding, correct?
Yes.
And I assume that's where he's getting the renovation part. From those who have looked at that, they have said, isn't that the same as would you be in D.C. and vote for something just to get it to the next vote and then vote against it, which we've seen with Congressman Nongebauer?
You know, this is just misinformation at its best. I voted against the purchase of the Omni building. Mm-hmm. But once we purchased it, we owned the building, then we had to determine what's it going to cost to renovate, what's it going to cost to tear it down. That's the only vote I voted yes on. And when the numbers came in so high, I voted against spending the money on the Omni building, right. And I also voted against issuing the debt. My opponent knows this, and it's just an attempt to divert attention from his failed record, from the fact that he is a Washington insider, and try to attack me.
Glen Robertson, appreciate your time.
Glad to be here. Thank you.